From a scientific perspective, if Jesus didn't have a biological father, like the evangelicals claim, which I believe Mary was not a virgin, that's another thing of bad theology we can get into later,
Yeah.
all that bad stuff. But if that was true, it's not. But if it was, then Jesus doesn't have the Y chromosome, which means Jesus can't be male.
Yo, you spilling it all. Sorry, I just hit my mic. This stuff gets me it gets me so worked up though, because I'm like, I try to balance. Granted, there are not a lot of very religious people in my life, and the ones that are like, I had my friend Morgan on a while ago. This would have been over a year ago. She was on the podcast, and she kind of went through, this process where she found community in church, and she was, hoping to work her way up to being a pastor. Did a missionary trip, and I was like, what are you doing? But she like really just got into it. And even when we have these conversations, I mean, in that episode, we kind of talk through it about like just kind of being on different ends of this, but still being friends. And other than her, there's maybe one or two friends that like have gone to church in the past, or like, well, occasionally like for Christmas, do stuff, or Easter. But actually having conversations with people about like what religion says about LGBT or about abortion or about these things, like my brain just short circuits and I just can't, because I end up just wanting to like shake people and be like, what are you even saying? This doesn't even make sense to me, but not wanting to be rude and not wanting to be judgmental about it. And also knowing, I've never read the Bible. I'm not super educated in it either. So like, I'm not going to, in a debate with someone, right? Like, I don't know what's come back at with this kind of stuff, but all of what you're saying makes so much sense, where it's like, yeah, there is so much of this that has just been picked and taken and transformed in order to meet the systems and the concepts and the foundations of white supremacy. And this is where, like we say, pleasure is resistance, because when you allow yourself to actually engage in that pleasure, you're basically saying, fuck all of these things that are telling me right now that I don't deserve to, that it's bad or it's a sin for me to, or that I have to earn this, right? If I'm married, if I'm monogamous, if I'm cis, if I'm, all these things, if I'm having a baby, then it's okay. Like, you're fighting against all of that when you do engage in pleasure. And just hearing this of like, servant, you spilled it. I was not no servant. But like, but just picking and taking these things, gosh, it makes me really wonder, on one hand, well, why, if these things are not actually rooted in scientific, or even if you're taking it as is, as truth even, then why is there such a hold to it? And in part, I think because what church today is that it's created community. It gives people a sense of understanding of what life is, and life can feel really, really fucking scary, right? And like, what are we supposed to do? How are we supposed to live? It's kind of this like falsehood of, this is how you live a moral life. This is how you live a good life. This is how you make sure you're rewarded in the next life. And here's a bunch of community with it as well. But I think it also, in a subtextual context, maybe for folks that they don't really understand it, is that it is helping uphold white supremacy, because that includes these anti-LGBTQ IA concepts, right? It includes the financial wealth gap of things. It includes the strong heteronormative monogamous thing that's pushed out there. It also does include things, I mean, I think around health and around food and around fat phobia and anti-fatness, even with like gluttony, right? And like being like, it just, I don't know, maybe I'm off here. Is there like scripture that you can think of that like includes that element of this?
Oh yeah, I mean there's fat phobia that's being projected from the pulpit, but when it talks about gluttony in the Bible, again, it's more condemning the practice of taking more than you need and not sharing
Mm,
with others. And I mean, Jesus was a socialist in every way, shape,
yeah.
form. I mean, maybe not, maybe socialism as we know it didn't exist back then, but if Jesus was going to more align with any other economic stance,
Yeah.
it would be socialism. And the problem is, the church was created to uphold imperial power, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And what the system has done is it's cranked out chaplains of empire. And I think a lot of these people are well intended, but they don't realize that white supremacy is baked into theology for a reason, because it's designed to keep powerful people powerful. It's designed to subdue us, because if we can create a
Mm-hmm.
theology where there is this utopian afterlife, then we stop caring about the suffering that we experience on a daily basis as much, right? So what's interesting is, from a biblical perspective, Jesus was Jewish. Jesus did not believe in a heaven or a hell. Again, these are Hellenistic ideals from Rome that got injected into Christianity. And what was Rome but an ancient version of America, right? Like, Rome was trying to maintain power. And the whole
Yeah.
reason Rome chose Christianity to infiltrate and to use for its own advantage was because Christianity was growing, and rather than losing power, Rome just kind of shed its clothing and became something else. So it converted its temples, but a lot of the ideals that were there to promote empire and to nurture empire were infused with Christianity. So they put that in a blender, they pressed puree, and out popped the church. And a lot of people don't know this, but again, church is designed to either distract us from the ills of this life, from the sinful behaviors of this life, which in my mind is white supremacy, corporate greed,
Mm-hmm.
is intolerance, is environmental destruction. These things are biblically sinful, in my opinion, and they should be taken seriously.
Yeah.
Or it's designed to ritualize complicity. And what happens every time we have a national tragedy is people come to the church and they're looking for answers or possibly ways to get involved, and their pastor gets up, and sometimes well-intentioned and sometimes bigoted, it just depends on the pastor. They spew this message of what heaven's going to look like, and immediately it subdues their congregants and puts them back in complacency. And that is part of the problem. It is the problem.
Ritual complacency. Oh, that hits. Damn. Yeah, I mean, it in a way creates this sense of toxic positivity of like, we're gonna pray for them.
Yeah.
We're praying. When you see mass shooting after mass shooting, it's we're gonna
Mhm.
pray for everybody. Okay, but you could also vote for like gun control laws. Like, what do
Yeah.
you mean you're just gonna pray for them and things are gonna be
Yeah.
okay?
And how odd is it that there's more caps being popped in schools than quizzes on a weekly basis?
Tell them.
And the church is, on the side of the NRA, but the Bible is so anti-weapon. Jesus was anti-weapon. Yet what the church is known for is being pro-abortion, not in the Bible, being anti-masturbation, not in the Bible, being anti-LGBT, not in the Bible, being pro-masculine theology and projecting a
Mhm.
masculine image of God, not in the Bible, being pro-weapon, which is definitely not in the Bible. And yet, what does the church look like? If I were to ask anybody that doesn't attend a church, what do they value more than anything? They're going to say guns, restraining yourself sexually. They're going to say being anti-abortion. They're going to say voting Republican
Mhm.
and being pro-capitalist. None of that bullshit was in the Bible. I don't know where the fuck it came from. Oh, I mean, I know where it came from. It came from white supremacy, like we were talking about. And it's hijacked my faith. And I think one of the most beneficial things that Christians can do, or people that just admire the Christian faith, maybe you're not a Christian, but maybe
Mhm.
you're just tired of Christians using scripture to vote with
Mhm.
toxic values in their mind, start talking about it. Start shutting down that racist uncle that uses the
Mhm.
Bible to smack people over the face with their intolerance. Start
Yeah.
calling that bullshit out. And if you need information on how to do that, I mean, I'm not alone. I know it seems like I'm rare. The difference between me and some of these folks is I'm just more brash. But there are theologians that are much older than myself that have been doing the work. There's folks like Bart Ehrman. There's folks like Rob Bell. There's folks like Nadia Boltz-Weber. There's William Barber, the head pastor of the Poor People's Campaign. If you've never heard him speak, but such a powerful preacher on racial justice and social justice. Do the work, send them links, call them out, and cut them off if necessary, because sometimes consequences are all that's going to fix these people. But for me, I'm just, I'm tired of watching these scriptures that I admire, that I take far too seriously to read literally, being used to hurt people. Because in my mind, they were written to do just the opposite.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, I think even I think I had like a basic religion course in undergrad, and it was like learning about all these religions, like majority, specifically Christianity, just seemed like it had started so many wars, like it had hurt so many people, that it was like, what good does this really do? I really couldn't find anything other than like create community and like trick you into thinking about this like fantasy life that helps you cope better with your day-to-day life and all of the uncertainty that's in it. And maybe that sounds a bit bitchy and mean.
No, it doesn't.
That was kind of, I was like, okay, I guess this is like the draw.
Now, institutional religion teaches some really lazy coping mechanisms for the struggles of life. And I think there's a reason for that. It's to keep you calm and complacent and things of that nature. I do think people need community. And I don't think you necessarily need to find that in the church. And that's kind of where our church spends our time focusing more on communal aspects and less about, spirituality, more about ethical teachings, moral teachings, and creating community. The downside is this is not exclusive to Christianity, because one of the things that I see that's very similar spiritually is this idea of positivity, right? Like that comes about with New Age spirituality, which is really just repackaged white supremacy too in yoga pants. I mean, that's
well, it's cultural appropriation in yoga pants.
It is. Yep, exactly. And they've taught that, if you just think the right way, then things are going to work out for you. And usually people that are teaching that are people of privilege that come from financially stable backgrounds.
Yeah.
So I think one thing that we got to be very careful with the coming generation, I say with us young people, but I'm not young anymore.
It's all right, include yourself.
But I think for the next generation, one thing to be careful of is, don't just be worried about toxic theology. Be worried about those harmful ideals when they manifest themselves in other spiritual practices too, because white supremacy is sneaky like that.
Oh, it is.
And so just be very aware would be something to look out for.
Well, so how do you then, like, I'm wondering as a pastor, how do you go about creating a community of sex positivity within this space?
Well, we have people in our church that are poly. We have people in our church that are monogamous. We have people in our church we have leaders in our church that are part of the LGBT community. I ordain weddings in the LGBT community. I affirm sex positivity in almost all of our teachings. One thing that for me, I think is important in churches is to shut down values that make their way into, that make that space unsafe.
Yeah.
We have a tendency in the church to say we want everybody to feel welcome. But the problem is when bigots are comfortable, then everyone's not safe.
Yeah.
One of the most important values, if you're going to be an inclusive church, is to shut down values that are exclusive from the pulpit. And if that means losing them, then don't let the door hit them where the good Lord split them. But I think for us, speaking inclusion and shutting down exclusion is one of the most valuable things we do as a community. It self-regulates our congregants. We're not going to be a huge Six Flags Over Jesus church, but I think most of our congregants feel safe, and that's what's important to me.
And now, may the revolution of Jesus go with you wherever it may send you. May it guide you in healing this wasteland and protect you through the storm. May it lead you through this world seeking the justice it demands for you and for others. And may it bring you home preparing to continue love's mission beyond your doors. Grace and justice to you.